was May 30th, 2013, and it was my birthday. And I went for a walk that morning, and I began reflecting on the past year of my life. And I had a realization that morning as I was reflecting, and that realization was this, that as I look back on that past year, not a lot of growth had taken place. You experienced that before? You look back on your life and you realize you're in the same place that you were the year before. I knew that if I ever wanted to pursue the life that I was created to live and achieve the goals that I had set for myself, I needed to make a change. And that morning, I realized that, and it caused me to make a decision that ultimately would alter the course of my life. You see, up until this point, my life had been ruled by insecurity, self-doubt. I grew up from a really young age, severely overweight. And so from a young age, I got made fun of, I got bullied. I was the butt of every joke. And at a young age, that does a lot to a kid. It does a lot. And it's one thing when you're young, but it's another thing when you begin to believe the things that people say about you, and it stays with you as you get older. So I became someone who was a starter and not a finisher. These insecurities caused me to start a lot of things and be excited, but never finish anything because I didn't believe in myself. People would say things to me like, "You're never going to graduate. What are you even doing trying this? You're never going to make it. Why even try? Why not give up?" People said this to me growing up, and I began to believe it, and it began to affect the way that I lived, affect the way that I thought. How many of you guys know the way that we think, our thoughts affect our life? Our thoughts affect our life. I titled this talk, Getting Your Mind Right, and I want to talk about one thing that can either paralyze or empower each of us in our lives, and that's our mindset. Our mindset. A good definition of mindset is this, write this down. A consistent set of thoughts that represent a specific set of beliefs. These beliefs begin to shape the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we act. So, our mindset affects our life. It affects our relationship. It affects how we show up. It affects our business. It affects each and every area of our life. Now, our thoughts, they create our reality, and they could be good thoughts, they could be bad thoughts, they could be thoughts about things you want, things you don't want, things you're excited about, or things you fear. But whatever the case may be, our thoughts affect our life, and oftentimes we get so consumed with what's going on around us, and we go through life steeped in either one mindset or another without the clear realization that whatever it is that we think about or we focus on consistently, we move towards. We move towards it. And whether you think that's subjective or not, the truth is we're a product of our thoughts. So that morning, as I'm on a walk, I realized I don't want my story to be the same that it's been. I don't want next year to look back and see that there's been no change and no growth. I have a life that I've envisioned that I want to live. And so I decided that morning that I knew that it was going to take commitment. It was going to take making a decision that I'm going to change in every area. I had this deep desire to grow in every area of my life, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally. Up until this point, I was 23 years old, no vision, lack of clarity, lack of purpose, unhealthy in every area of my life, and I said, enough's enough. So I made a decision that morning. For whatever reason, like any sane person would do, I decided to commit a year of my life to training for an Ironman triathlon. Sounds logical. But here's why I committed to the Ironman, because I knew that if I wanted to grow in every area of my life, it was going to require me to commit to something that was so big and so daunting that it would require all of me to accomplish it. It would require all of me. And so I committed that day to doing the Ironman. And I knew, because the way, my habitual way of thinking up until that point, that the first thing that had to change, step one, was my mindset. And here's what I want you guys to write down if you're taking notes is this, is commitment to any goal Commitment to a process of becoming or accomplishing anything always requires a mindset shift. It always requires a mindset shift. Because the way of thinking got you to where you are, and you don't like where you are, or maybe you do like where you are, but you want to push yourself further. It requires a mindset shift. I knew I had to change my mindset. I told my family that day when I had committed to doing the Ironman. I went home, I said, Mom, Dad, Chelsea, Allie, I'm going to do the Ironman. I'm going to train for it this year. I'm going to do it next year. I'll never forget what they said. They looked at me and they said, awesome, bud. You know what that is? As if I commit to something I had no idea what it was. And then I told my friends, I remember we were out at breakfast and I was like, guys, I'm doing the Ironman, I'm training, I'm going to do it this next year. And they all responded like, man, that's awesome. Good luck. Word of the wise, if your family and friends respond that way, they do not believe in you, okay? But I realized in that season of my life, and this applies to all of us, we're going to go through seasons of our life, and I was in one then where my family and friends, they supported me, but they did not believe in me. And we're going to have people along our journeys that support us but don't believe in us. And that's okay because up until that point, I hadn't really earned the belief. I hadn't really earned the right to be believed in. And so I knew more than anything, and this goes for all of us, man, when you commit to something, no one can want it more than you, and no one can believe in you more than you need to believe in yourself. And I realized in that moment, I had to believe in myself. I had to believe in myself. So I committed to the Ironman. I start training. I remember day one of training. My training plan said this, very daunting. It said 1 mile run. Okay, give me something hard, right? But I leave the house, I make it a half mile down the road, and I'm tired, and I'm exhausted. I need my inhaler, and I had to walk home. Man, talk about discouraging. Here I was, riding this high, signed up for this event. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to do an Ironman, and I make it a half mile down the road, and I am tired. I remember turning around, walking home that day, and these thoughts crept in. They said, Levi, what are you thinking? You're not built for this. What did you just do? What did you just do? Because again, I had this habitual way of thinking. And I thought, I can never do this. But I knew that when I committed, what does it take? A mindset shift. And so during that walk home, I began to say, you know what, you're right. You can't do it yet, but you will. You made it half mile today. You'll make it further tomorrow. And what I want you guys to know is any goal you have, any process that you are embarking on, if you want to finish big, you got to start small. To finish big, you got to start small. I was focused on the problem and not the process. And I had to reshift my focus and retrain my mindset and focus on the process, focus on the plan, and trust that if I did that every single day, eventually I would reach my finish line. I was retraining my mind to think this way. I got home and I decided to post on Facebook what I was doing, right? And in 2013, that was a real thing. Like, it was not real unless you posted on Facebook. For anyone who started a relationship back then, you know that. It's official. So I posted on Facebook. Here's why I posted on Facebook. I wanted accountability. Something I never wanted in the past. Never wanted accountability. But I realized in that moment that if I was going to do something so hard that required all of me, that I needed to not give myself a way out. So I posted on Facebook for accountability. Here's why. The right mindset seeks accountability. It wants it. The right mindset wants accountability. I knew that hard times would come. I'd face challenges, and I didn't just want the easy way out. I wanted everybody to know what it was I was doing. So I started training. I moved back to Seattle at this point. I was going to school, so I was taking a full class schedule. I was working a full-time job, and I was training upwards of 20 hours per week. Swim, bike, run. And guys, this was a big deal for me. I had never barely even worked a full-time job, let alone commit to this process of discipline and determination. And I did that for 1 year, 7 days a week. Began to see the change take place in my own life. Remember, I went home. Ironman week was approaching, so excited. And I went home. And how many of you guys know when someone leaves, they kind of freeze in your mind the way they left? right? I remember seeing my parents, "Bud, you look great. You look like you feel great. You look good." And they began to see the change take place in the way that I was living my life and the way that I was carrying myself. And the night before the Ironman, we had friends and family over, celebrating this big event I'm about to do, and getting excited, getting a little nervous. And I was about to go to bed, and I remember my dad pulled me aside, and I'll never forget this conversation. He pulled me aside. He said, "Hey, bud, I want you to know that I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of what you've committed to and what you've done, and I want you to know that if you don't finish, that's okay. That's okay." And what he was doing as a father, he was protecting me. He was giving me an out. Because up until this point in my life, he had never seen me finish barely anything. And I remember looking at him, first time in my life, feeling this sense of confidence in myself and belief in myself, and I said, "Dad, not finishing is not even an option. It just, if I get the time that I want, that's the question." He heard me speak that day with so much confidence that I myself had never even experienced. Go to bed, I wake up the next day, it's Ironman morning. Anyone who's done an Ironman or been to one, you know you could cut the tension with a knife. It's pretty windy. I look at my phone and I see there's going to be upwards of 35-mile-per-hour winds. For all you cyclists, that is not fun. It's like riding a bike with a parachute on your back. And I began to have thoughts like, "Oh my gosh, this is not going to be fun." And then I get downtown, and I remember specifically parking the car, and I look to the right, I see the lake, and I see whitecaps. Now, it's a lake, but whitecaps. And I'm like, dude, I'm swimming 2.4 miles in that thing with 2,000 people. But again, I realized in that moment I was prepared. I had committed to a process that had got me to where I was, and I was prepared. And oftentimes, we're going to experience things in our life that we cannot control. Could I control the weather? I couldn't control the weather. What could I control? My thoughts and my effort. And so I shifted my focus. I flipped the switch, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to give it my all. I'm prepared for this. Today, I'm going to be an Ironman." And I remember towing the line with 2,000 people. There's an image of Ironman Coeur d'Alene 2014 coming up of 2,000 people on the beach. And I remember standing there, again, cut the tension with the knife, and I'm excited, and I begin to reflect on this past year of my life, and I'll never forget the feeling of emotion that welled up inside of me because I was there. I had put the work in. I'd committed to a process. I had done the training. This was my reward. Now, got to get through a pretty hefty feat to cross the finish line, but this was my reward, and I was there. Gun went off. I got in the water. In an hour and 32 minutes, I get out of the water, finishing a 2.4-mile open water swim, longest swim I had ever done in my life. And I had this huge smile on my face. I'm high-fiving my dad right there. And I had this smile on my face because I met this 70-year-old woman the day before who was doing the Ironman. She'd done like 10 or 12. And I remember her saying, "You know what? Smile every mile." And I loved it. I loved it. And that was her mindset. I heard it in the way she talked. Because here's the deal, it's going to be hard. Anything you've committed to or any dream you have buried deep down within, if you want to accomplish it, it's going to be hard, so enjoy it. And I decided I'm going to smile every mile, and I did. And I got out and I smiled and I got on the bike. 35-mile-per-hour winds. To say it was easy would be a complete lie. 112-mile bike ride. And there's this point, for any Ironman out there, if you're not one or you don't know one who is, I'll tell you about it. It's the mile marker 80 of the bike. They call it the make it or break it point. Every triathlete that I know has experienced it, and it's this moment where you realize, I am completely exhausted. I am so tired. Here in Coeur d'Alene, you're going up Cougar Bay Hill. If you know that hill, it is a long, steep hill, and you're going up it for the second time that day. And I'm climbing this hill, and I see mile 80, and I begin to cry because I'm hurting, and I'm climbing a hill, and I got wind in my face, and I begin to cry. But I remember what everyone said, and here's what I know. No matter what it is, Ironman or not, we're all going to experience make it or break it points in our journey. Each and every one of us will experience make it or break it points, and you have one of two choices. One, you can give up. You can throw in the towel. But two, you can redirect your thoughts, redirect your mindset, and say, you know what? Growth comes with challenges. Growth comes with challenges, right? Because here's what I know. Challenges hit your weakness, but they bring with it the opportunity to unlock your strength. And in that moment, I had to tap into my strength and say, you know what? I'm going to go one more mile, and one more mile, and one more mile, and I finish the bike. And I get off the bike, and I began to have this realization of a goal. Because at this point, I knew I had it in the bag. I was like, all I got to do is run a marathon. And you laugh now, but an Ironman is the only event where you will start a marathon and be like, that's it? I got it in the bag. I had time, and I remember thinking, this is awesome. I'm doing it. I start the run, and I make it halfway through the run. In this picture right here, I see my family at mile 13.1, all my friends in these bright yellow shirts and their signs, and I pull up next to them, and my dad looks at me, he's like, how you doing? And I'm smiling, I'm like, I'm doing awesome. This feels great. And he's like, really? Well, I mean, you look awesome, but really? And I realized he still don't believe I'm doing this thing. As if I was going to go 127 and a half miles to, too hard. I'm done. 13 miles later, 0.1 miles away from my finish line. And I'm rounding the corner on Sherman Avenue here downtown. And I see Dave Miller, who we heard from this morning, and he gives me a hug, and he says, Levi, you're going to be an Ironman. Go to your finish line. And I'm running. I found this out later, but David called my parents, and he said, Levi's going to do it. My parents said that was the moment they realized I was going to finish. So I'm running down Sherman Avenue, and I'm surrounded by people who are cheering me on, yelling my name, filled with this sense of being proud of myself for the first time. I began to approach the finish line, and that's a picture that was taken in. You couldn't redo that if you wanted to. This beautiful, gorgeous North Idaho sunset over the finish line. I see the lake. I see my family. I'm actually waving at my family right there. And I'll tell you what, this feeling of, you know what, I decided a year ago I was going to change in every area of my life and commit to this process, and this is my finish line. And it was so symbolic for me because for me, this may sound super cheesy, but for me, the sun was setting on that season of my life. I'd done it. And across the finish line, I hear the announcer say, Levi Gurno from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, you are an Ironman. Words I never, ever thought I would hear. The next morning, my dad and we were at the Ironman finishers breakfast, and we're leaving, and we're in his truck, and my dad's still riding a higher high than I am, and he's like, Bud, that was so awesome. I'm so proud of you. Oh, man, I've always wanted to do that, but there's just no way I could. So you guys know, take notes. Don't ever tell someone who just did something that you could never do it. Okay? And I said, what'd you say? He's like, I've always wanted to do it. I've watched it for years, 12 years. Always wanted to do it. And that was the same with me. And he said, well, you know, there's just no way I could. We're a product of our thoughts. There's no way I could. I said, why? He's like, I can't swim. I couldn't swim a year ago. Well, true. But I got bad knees. I've had 2 knee surgeries, and you know I can't run. That's okay. The reality is this. You change your lifestyle. You set out, you commit to this. You're going to lose a little weight, right? Everyone likes that. And then you're going to be able to run. It's going to be a little easier on your knees. And here's the deal, Dad. You master the swim and you master the bike. You could walk the marathon and still finish. So what was I doing? I was removing his excuses. Because there's going to be times in our life where we have to have people around us that are willing to see the dream inside of us that we don't see in ourselves, that are willing to see the passion inside of us that we don't see in ourselves, and are willing to remove all of your excuses and leave you with this one simple question that I asked my dad. I said, Dad, do you want to do it or not? Yes or no? And it didn't matter to me, but it mattered to him, and I knew that. I said, do you want to do it or not? Yes or no? Because if you do, I'll do it with you. He said, but I'd never ask you to do that. You just committed a year of your life to that. There's no way I could ask you to do that. I said, Dad, no. If you want to do it, if the answer is yes, I'm doing it with you. And he looked at me with this passion, kind of angry, and excitement and fear, and he was like, yes! But don't tell Mom. So we started training, we committed. We didn't tell Mom. She found out after a lot of money and equipment and training and hours gone later. She just kind of put the two and two together and said, you're doing an Ironman, huh? Yep. Okay, so I go back to Seattle and we start training, following the same training plan together. I called my dad every single day after every training. I said, Dad, how'd it go? Every phone call for months and months, I would end the call and I'd say, Dad, you're going to be an Ironman in 6 months. Dad, you're going to be an Ironman in 5 months. Dad, you're going to be an Ironman in 4 months, because I was painting this picture of him. I wanted him to visualize the finish line, that he was going to be an Ironman. I remember one specific day I called my dad after a swim, and I said, Dad, how'd your swim go? And I could sense discouragement, and he said, Bud, it went bad. It was horrible. I said, why? What happened? He said, I showed up to the Croc Center. I went into the pool area, and I saw these swimmers, and I decided I was going to time the really fast dude over here. And so I timed a lap, and then I saw the slowest guy in the pool, and I decided I was going to time him. And then he's like, and then I got in the water, and I timed myself, and he said, Bud, I am slower than the slowest person in the pool, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I said, Dad, why are you worried about anybody else? Why are you focused on the other swimmers in the pool? This isn't their race. This is your race. It's not their journey. It's your journey. Not their goal. It's your goal. A lot of us in this room have goals for the year. Maybe you don't, but maybe you have dreams buried deep down within. And I want to tell you, when you're on the process, the fastest way to derail the steps you've taken is to compare your journey to somebody else's. Because whatever it is this year, if it's you want to turn your business around, your business is nobody else's, it's yours. You want to turn your marriage around, it's your marriage, not anybody else's. It's your physical goals, not anybody else's. In this moment, it was his goal, not anybody else's. And no pun intended, but I said, Dad, stay in your lane. And I said that. Because the right mindset is focused. It stays in its own lane. We made it to Ironman week, and we're so excited. We've talked about this for a year. Day before the race, we look at the weather. Anyone who remembers 2015? 108 degrees. Hottest Ironman in history. People were calling my mom that week, saying, hey, this is dangerous. Terry has nothing to prove. He shouldn't do this. I was a little frustrated. I understand from a health standpoint, but I was frustrated because, again, we can't control the weather. We can't control what's happening outside of us. And I remember pulling my dad aside. I said, Dad, I don't care what anybody's saying. I don't care if it's hot or cold or rain or shine. We trained for this. We prepared for this. And tomorrow you're going to be an Ironman. You got to focus. We start the race that day. I was a little bit ahead of my dad because I'm, no offense, Dad, a faster swimmer. I get in the water and I get out and I made it through my swim. And I'm just thinking, did my dad make it? Did my dad make it? Did my dad make it? About an hour later, I'm on the bike. I see him on the bike. He made it. The one thing he thought he couldn't do, he finished the swim. We're on the bike that day and it starts to get real hot. It's crept up to 108 degrees, 145 radiating off the pavement. I'll never forget what I saw as I'm passing all of these different aid stations and medical tents, and they're packed with people getting IVs, people passing out, throwing up, and it was not a good scene. I'm seeing ambulances go up and down, and I haven't seen my dad for a while. And I had a friend of mine pull up next to me in a car, ask how I was doing. I said, I'm doing fine. Have you seen my dad? They said, yeah, he's coming on his second loop. Well, at that time, I knew he was behind because you have time cutoffs at the Ironman. I knew he was behind, and I remember looking at my watch, and it was the first time I realized he may not finish. He may not make it. And we didn't plan for that. But I still had a race to run, and so I finished the bike, and I get on the run. About 10 miles into my run, one of my best friends pulled up next to me and asking me how I'm doing. I'm like, I'm fine. Where's my dad? He said, dude, Your dad made it to mile 90, 15 minutes behind, his race is over. He's done. And that, we didn't plan for that. And I remember saying, hey, I'm going to be in town in about 3 miles. I want to see my dad. And so I get through town, I see my dad. And when I see him, I fall into his arms. And this is a picture that was taken, and I begin to weep from deep down within. And all I can say is, Dad, I'm sorry. Dad, I'm sorry. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm crying. And my dad pushes me aside, and he said, Bud, I am not sorry, because you got me to do something that I never thought that I could do. And here's the key. He said, I'm done today, but I am not finished. I will finish this race someday, but today you have a race to finish. And he encouraged me on, and I went on to finish my second Ironman that day. For those of you guys who know the story, some of you guys don't, my dad decided to recommit the next year to Ironman 2016. He hired a coach, Corey McKenna, who you heard from earlier, and he was dialed in, he was focused. This was going to be the year. So the year. I was training with him, I had committed to it, but I had some health stuff come up, and doctor said it probably wouldn't be good for me to do the race, and so 10 days before I said, Dad, I can't do it with you, but I'll be there for you like you were for me. You're going to be an Ironman. My dad started the 2016 Coeur d'Alene Ironman. And that day, he was the final finisher with 1 minute and 20 seconds to spare. And he crossed the finish line. And the announcer said, Terry Gurno, you are an Ironman. 1 minute and 20 seconds to spare. And here's what I know, you guys. It's January 2020. We have goals. Some of us do. Some of us have dreams that are buried deep down within, or maybe you've identified some areas in your life that you want to change, and I want you to know that you can. And here's what it takes: commitment. Is it a goal, or are you committed? And if you're committed, my question for you is this: do you have the right mindset that it takes to achieve that? Are you committed to a process of starting small so that you can finish big? Are you surrounding yourself with people who will take away your excuses and will be there for you when it gets hard? And when it does get hard, because it will. Maybe the goal doesn't happen when you wanted it to. Maybe you don't accomplish it in the right time frame, or whatever the case may be. Is your response going to be, I'm done? Or will it say, I'm done today, but I am not finished? May 30th, 2013, it was a day that I made a decision that ultimately changed the course of my life forever. The day after my Ironman, I posted on Facebook, and I said, 1 year ago, I committed to growing in every single area of my life, spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And today I can confidently say that I am a different person. I'm a different person. And this wasn't just Ironman, this affected every area of my life, and to this day has changed the way that I live in my relationships, has changed my marriage, has changed my business. And I want you to know that January 9th, 2020, you have an opportunity to say, you know what? I'm going to go after that goal. I'm going to uncover that dream. And I'm going to believe in myself and begin to change the way I think so that I can have the right mindset to accomplish it. Because remember, what it is we think about and focus on consistently, we move towards. So I want to leave you guys with 2 questions. 1, what are you moving towards? What are you moving towards? And what story will you tell in 2020? Thank you, guys.